Rosehill meeting on the 18th of June. 4 metre rail and track's downgraded to a slow 7. Pardon me. No real strong bias on the day other than sort of hard fence didn't look the greatest place to be, but most results looked tempo related and it looked pretty fair that you could come from anywhere for tempo giving, and not a huge day of things happening, but definitely sort of worthy of going through. One of those winter sort of meetings where a lot of races didn't really add up, or it looked like there weren't too many horses that really wanted to win or were set up to win, so we'll go through it. First race was the 2-year-old race over 1350. Pretty steady tempo. Fox Play was a heavily backed $1.60 favourite. Not too many horses were set up well here, as in hadn't had runs under their belt. A couple of first starters, a couple of horses first up in their preparations or fresh in their preparations. So Fox Play was definitely the most obvious, but probably started a little bit shorter than I anticipated. Not a lot happens in the run. Fox Play takes control early, probably the worst horse in the race, as in ride-wise, as Cogliere comes out with them, train back, pardon me, and eventually has to push forward again. Been caught wide throughout, and they have gone along steady, so his effort's pretty solid, even though he did have a bit of fitness on his side. The runs of Muariba, and Ocean City are probably the two best of the horses not suited, or one on debut, one first up from a spell. There's a bit of merit in their efforts. Hanover Square was okay, but every possible chance in the run. Smart Venture goes back to the worst part after missing the start, but again it was a little bit plain as well. The Perry horse's provincial country form was found out of touch. He had every chance in the front. Fox Play and Cogliere definitely clearly the best two efforts. You see Ocean City chiming in here and does peak late. Muariba whacks away first up, so their effort's okay. They can improve. Cogliere's going well enough to win a race, that's for sure. Probably just a rider change and place to advantage. And Fox Play's definitely on the up and will win more races on that effort. It was just a very dominant win. Pardon me again. Not a whole lot to be learnt there, but definitely can follow the winner. Cogliere placed a little bit more to advantage, possibly back to the provincials. Hanover Square's probably midweek needs to drop back to at this time, and Ocean City Muariba can improve on what they've done here. Race 2. Small field over the 2000. And just a great ride from Pena, I thought. Here she does set a fairly solid tempo in front, but takes her time getting there and setting that solid rolling tempo, which is her bit of a specialty at the moment. Drags the sprint out of the others and really will sort of arrive beyond her years. Takes that whole sort of time, never bustling the horse too heavily to cross. Puts McAvoy here in sort of an uncomfortable position, which is to Foreign Prince's advantage. McAvoy definitely doesn't want to lead, knows that Pena's going across, but sort of she takes her time so much that he's in that awkward position. Eventually she crosses, and Sabrina now sort of pops a little check or checks off heels and ends up losing a couple of lengths, and now in a position she doesn't want to be in or not happy to be here. She was a bit of a distance query as well, and when Pena's sort of maintaining that tempo throughout, off and rolling here, she's really dragged the sprint out of these horses, and they're forced to maintain an effort which probably Sabrina was the main danger, always having that cold sit but up in trip and having the sprint dragged out of her. She was always going to struggle to run down the leader, who's really struck good form last two starts. Just an average race, and not sure what sort of level Foreign Prince can get to. Maybe this time of year really suits at these wet tracks, getting out in front, bowling along against, you know, not a great level of stayer. I think I'd much prefer to see Sabrina drop back to the mile than press forward in distance. Loophole, you know, an average Saturday class horse. Jaguar's probably still getting fitter, so it can be forgiven, and Beyond Thankful just seems to be not finding the line at all. So it's a good time of year for Foreign Prince to be up and running and going well on these sort of tracks, and probably can keep racing well in similar. Sabrina back in distance, Loophole in something similar will be competitive, but doubt it'll be dominant, and Jaguar's got to be close to ready now to do something. Race 3, the highway race. Surprised the King's Office didn't go at a much more dominant favourite. I saw Callaway Cruiser did blow in the market as expected, but still only for sort of 5 to 1 when a lot longer price was sort of expected. They did nibble at Erica and a couple of others, the Cavalier, but still it was surprising that King's Office actually blew in the betting. It ends up a pretty dominant performance. They do run along, and it is a fairly average sort of overall race. King's Officer covers more ground than Burke and Wills throughout the race, never really seems to have cover, and he's 4 or 5 wide the entire and widest in the straight, so they've all had their chance to beat him. He will be working a little bit even though he's back in the field here, as he has no cover. All the horses that finish with him, Explosive Scene, Erica, are all back here in this pack. The leaders all have a fairly tough run. Auckland Booty ends up dropping out after racing a bit fiercely in front. Don't mind the effort. She's Invincible coming into the race here. Probably just didn't get the distance. Maybe back in distance for it, and in fact for Provincials country, it looks ready to do something. Does track into the race quite nicely, and is a non-pace sort of type back in that grade. The King's Office is just too strong for them. They've all had their chance to beat it. This horse here, Stratum Siren's one that I think, I'm not sure why it's getting so far back in its races, but it's toughing out its races, not too bad, and probably ready to win as well back in grade. So the 2 horses that have finished sort of the back of this front pack, the 2 I'll be following back in grade, back in distance. She's Invincible. King's Office is just too good for these horses on these wet tracks. He's just too strong, and probably will continue to be if you meet a similar lineup again. But not the greatest highway draw much from there. Alright, so make sure you check your microphone battery before starting. Anyway, I'll pick up race 4. And this was a funny kind of race on paper where it didn't look like too many horses were that well set up for 1200 metres. At this stage of their preparations, they were all either going to be a little bit weak late or probably not ready for the trip over on a testing surface. So it was a tough race to work out on paper. Butterboom probably was a little bit overlooked by myself. It was the one that was always going to be sort of up there and had a few runs, so it wasn't too difficult to find, and it was that was probably exactly how it's won this race. It was just in the right place at the right time. Flamboyant Lass ran well, considering it wasn't trialling as well as that can. Magic of Dreams does a decent job. Thud's the one we'll have a close look at the run. Desperately Unlucky. Don't Doubt Marley was heavily backed and basically every chance. A little bit disappointing. The rest, Allard, probably a few excuses, and Winetails was badly held up as well. So 3.3 between the field on a race on a day where margins were pretty strong, and it's difficult to see this as being a very strong race going forward form wise. In saying that though, there are quite a few horses that weren't suited, so be careful doing the form out of it going forward, because the horses will be able to improve even though they may have been a little bit lacklustre here. So Allart's the first one. You notice misses the kick, driven. He's out of play, she's out of play basically straight away, not racing at her best and doing a few things wrong you wouldn't expect from her. So I'd probably go for a break, or I'd be laying off her until she shows better form. Butterboom straight outside the speed. Flamboyant Lass, they run along at a pretty even tempo. So everyone's basically getting their chance. Miss 10 Pins is the one that has the tough run facing the breeze. Magic of Dreams on the back of it. Everything else basically has its chance, at least to the turn. The ones we keep an eye on are Thud, and Winetails gets badly held up as well. Thud's the one there's an inquiry still open into. You probably would have expected Shin to come around Bonate's heels, turning for home, and he decides to sort of hang in there and ride for luck. Goes back to the inside and doesn't get much, flashes home and does look a good thing beaten. Here's probably where you expect Blake to come outside rather than in. He hangs in there, still hangs inside its heels. When it switches out, he switches with it and then goes back inside again, so it doesn't look great, but especially when she finishes the race off so solidly this last part. If we go back, you'll also see Winetails is just basically untested. So everything else has basically had its chance except for Alart, who's missed the kick driven and not beaten a long way. So there's a lot of pointers to say this race is not going to be, if you look at Alart, it's nearly coming again on the line, it's probably a bit stiff as well. So excuses for a few horses to say they should have finished closer. 3.3 between the lot of them. The horse beating the furthest margins had the toughest run. It's just a really bunched race that nearly you forget race from a form point of view. The one horse that's probably had its chance of not going great's Beneath. It's really struggling this prep, it seems, and Thrill Seeking, I don't know why they're persisting with 1200 metres in this grade. I think sort of 1000, 1100 is much more suitable for it. So going forward, there's obviously not a whole lot to be learnt there. I'd be treating that race as basically a glorified barrier trial for most of those horses. Race 5, and ends up being run at a pretty strong tempo here with the heavily backed and surprisingly heavily backed Nudie Rudy takes on Classic Uniform for the lead. Not sure how they came up with Nudie Rudy, and I'm not sure how they came up with the tactics where it was a bit soft last start. They've decided to go out and take on a horse back in distance who is a desperate leader, so very strange. Lanciato having its first start for Mark Newnham, runs really creditably, and Dingo Mountain, who sort of sat out the back and watched full unfold, got the run through, wins. Solid enough, but nothing too exciting really to report from this race. Last Witness was the one I expected to run a lot better race, but probably 1350, maybe a bridge too far for it, and no other real surprises. Vanderkamp runs an honest race, but about as well as could be expected. Classic Uniform's the one I'm interested on, having looked at it parade. Probably the run would immediately needed the run, and back up in trip next start is it's the one I'm looking to follow. So Nudie Rudy noticeably pushed out and then gets over racing a little bit after being pressured early to get that leading position. Not a lot happens. They've obviously run along at a solid tempo. The turn. So Classic Uniform gets the better of the leader, but he's not a dynamic horse. He's just a grinder, and the back marks with the soft sit chime in and claim him fairly comfortably in the end. Last Witness runs up to them, but then knocks up badly late, and it definitely needs to drop in distance, I'd say. Vanderkamp May needed a grade easier, and that's about it. These Dingamount's probably at its peak. It's probably got everything to suit there, and a solid enough win. It can be entertained next time out. Lanciato can definitely improve, and a very nice type of horse. Possibly the best prospect out of this race, and Classic Uniform back up in distance, similar grade, all ready to go. Pretty straightforward race. Oh, and Last Witness back in grade possibly, and back in distance as well. It's definitely going well enough to win a race. Race 6. Another race very similar to race 4, where there weren't a lot of winning horses in the race, as in set up to win or really looked to have a mortgage on the race. The horses I was interested in personally coming into the race were sort of Embley, Gambler's Blue, because it was going to be in the right spot, I thought, and with not a lot of speed on. And Better Not Blue, the one getting back and finishing off. Avanarco had run okay and probably was next pick, but at last start, that is. But the gate did seem a worry in a race that sort of lacked a bit of speed, and Bowman pushing the horse into a forward position early is, well, it has won him the race. Embley's had excuses and definitely can improve. Grand Punto's just a strange ride, which we will see. Gambler's Blues ran its honest race back in Trip. Definitely wasn't the race they had in mind for it here, I'm imagining, and he can improve sharply next time out. So first thing to see is Bowman being fairly aggressive early. Grand Punto back here, noted sort of midfield back marker, decides to sweep around them in a second. Pardon me. Better Not Blue is in another position there we just missed. Embley, who's right here coming into a forward midfield position, gets checked badly out of the race and over races from that point. That was probably him out of business, especially considering that they've only gone steady up front. It was always going to be difficult to run on anyway. See Grand Punto coming around putting the pressure on. Night Rocker, very strange tactical ride from Adkins. I think he's just had a bit of an off day and he may have not been at his best physically. Kanachi's had a bit of squeezing here, but not enough to say he hasn't had his chance in the race. Embley cuts back up the worst part. He really is one I think can improve out of the race. Never just looks comfortable or in the right spot. Possibly back to Ramwick. Key to that horse. Avanarco's always in control. Better Not Blues run that usual sucker race. Bold circle, always running on. And Gambler's Blues pretty one pace, but honest, the disappointing horse is probably Disgraceful, who went around favourite, but did look a bit of a falsish favourite on paper, and not surprising that it has run that midfield position. The other horse that obviously can be forgiven is Grand Punto, ridden upside down. And so going forward, Avanarco's obviously a progressive enough horse, can win more races, just an on pace, honest type that is pretty easy to pigeonhole when you're working a race out. He's pretty solid horse. Gambler's Blues needs everything to go his way and back up in distance. I think Embley can improve, similar distance, possibly a little bit further. And Better Not Blues, just one that's going to pop up one day, but probably best to be against than for him at this point, the way he's going. He definitely needs everything in his favour. Kanachi's going well enough to win something a little bit softer. One thing I did sort of pick up about Embley here is he doesn't really want to stretch out. He's sort of tighten for room until you even see him past the line. He's sort of 3 or 4 off him. They're obviously pulling up, but come to the turn, he's already in front and racing away. So I think he was a bit unlucky and can improve. Race 7, possibly one of the most confusing races I've ever seen. Apparently, Himalaya Dreams Connections have gone to the stewards and announced that they were to ride the horse back, and unfortunately that never made it to the punters, so it was very difficult to work out why it was back last watching the race, but it makes perfect sense obviously now. It was surprising to see Magical Stance heading forward. I thought it looked a perfect race for it to sit sort of midfield, and maybe Amarada would be around the same sort of position. So when they were up in the firing line, it was a bit of a nightmare, considering you sort of had Riker, Metallic Crown, Kellyville Flyer, that all were going to be up there, and Himalaya Dream before the race, trying to work it out. It obviously didn't work out that way. They've gone fast here, or fast, quite steady. They've gone sort of 4.5 lengths out quick and come home 3 slow. So it's a sort of solid sort of race. Springbok Flyer was helped by the pace. The one disappointing horse that didn't really run on, I'm surprised by how short it was Surf and Safari. Invincible was closer to the pace, but also quite disappointing. A race where again nothing was really set up to win. It did look to me that Amarada and Magical Stance were the two that would be best set up, but the race obviously didn't pan out the way I planned either, and both can be forgiven. Amarada's run's quite good, as we'll see. So quickly you see Magical Stance has been ridden aggressively early. Amarada as well ends up outside the leader, but the worst part to me is you'll even see from this point that Atkins is already trying to restrain Magical Stance. Why he's pushed into a forward position if he didn't want the horse to be there is my issue. When I say my issue, I'm saying my issue with the horse performing at its best. He's still continuing to try and restrain the horse here, and eventually Clipperton takes the front because of this, which is what makes Amarada's run so much better than basically anything else in the race. It's done a stack of work, it's still working. It takes off it early, and Atkins is still restraining Magical Stance. He was out of business well before this. The eventual winner, Himalaya Dream, just back here doing nothing while everything else was doing a little bit more work at the very least. Invincible is the one that has had the quiet sit, and is quite disappointing considering that Amarada's done so much more work and continues to pump, kick on. Himalaya Dream swamps it late. Middle distance type resuming goes okay. Zayam, fair enough. There are a few horses that have proved disappointing and will struggle to win races. I think Invincible's really struggling. Metallic Crown, Riker, Surf and Safari, all sort of horses that are really struggling to break through, and no real sign here that's going to stop. I can be forgiving a Magical Stance. Definitely needs a jockey change and just a good ride. Just needs to be probably 3 or 4 weeks off and a good ride, and I think he's okay. I don't know what to make of the winner. Had things in its favour here. It wasn't a great race, but it's been ridden against its pattern and finished a race off, so it's hard to be negative about it. Amarada's very impossible to be negative about it actually, and the rest are just horses that need things in their favour to win. So not much of a race with horses to follow. There are a few horses really struggling to probably pan. Springbok Flyer's not one of those. It's going to be up in truth and it's come back well obviously, but these sort of horses, Metallic Crown, Kellyville Flyer, Invincible, Surf and Safari and Riker, are ones that are going to be very hard to place. Race 8, probably the most promising race of the day from a horses to follow perspective. Heading into the race, I was really surprised that Santa Rocks was so short in the market, coming off a run at Canterbury where it basically had everything to suit. and was now going to a meeting where it was highly unlikely to lead and dictate, and even if it did, wasn't assured of a soft tempo or a rail position that was going to be in favour for it. The horses in the race I was keen to look at were Vassal, Olympic Academy, Thurston and Consign. Consign was getting to the trip a little bit quicker than I would have hoped, as was Thurston, so they're sort of a run behind. Olympic Academy was ready to peak and Vassal was coming back in distance, which was a little query, but it's obviously a very nice horse. Another solid enough tempo here for everything to have its chance, and nothing really happens in the run. They go along. Consign's the one closest. It was wide with no cover early and does over race a little bit. Will be better for the run. Vasal's on its back. Olympic Academy wide with cover, and Thurston second last. Shizoso, who did a lot of things wrong in the parade and can improve from it, ran well enough, hard fence the whole way. As we come turning, Consign's the first one that sort of challenges. Olympic Academy comes outside it and looks the winner. The winner, Vassal, cuts back through the middle, and Thurston just took a bit to wind up and probably peaked really late and should be spot on next time around. So at this point we're a little bit excited, thinking Consign and Olympic Academy are going to run 1-2, and Thurston's the one bursting through, but Vassal was just taking a little bit of time to wind up and hits the line extra strong. First Bloom's not a bad run late also. It's a pretty solid little race this, I'm tipping. So going forward, I'm not sure what their plans are with Vassal. I assume he's very close to a spell, even though he is racing very well. He's obviously a really nice type that can come back and win better races than this. Olympic Academy going well enough to run well again. Thurston should be peaking next start, but I'm sure will be well found in the market. Consign's the one I'm really interested in to back, probably back to Randwick in a mile, back 200 metres and back to Randwick. I'd really be keen to have a good look at him next time around. He looks really ready to win. And this run, First Bloom's not bad here either, so plenty of good efforts. Shizoso pretty solid as well. Good race, a good enough race to follow a few from. Lucky last, Element OP. The best back runners all run the placings. Freeze the Chargers, who was also well backed, runs the cheeky race I thought it was sort of capable of here. No real disappointments of any note. Lord Leofric bled for the second time, and that'll be the last time we see him here. Italian Sun runs really quite well, and that to me is a bit of a scare point for the race. It's obviously not too deep a race. Paint was ridden further back today and peaks late. Power Lines struggling to win in this sort of grade, but runs well enough. And LMNOP's just come back a much stronger horse. His preparation, that's 3 runs in a row where he's really wanted to hit the line, and he's a changed galloper. Again, not a lot happens in the run. Lord Leofric misses it. Freeze the Chargers, as usual, pushes forward. So the winner's in this position here, coming wide. Power Line in the middle. Paint's behind them. Freeze the Chargers in front. And the Bowman's given the grey Power Line a great ride, and look, the winner here, LMNOP, bumps a couple of times. It takes quite a while to flatten out, but at the end he's probably clearly the strongest, with Paint the one that's peaking, and Freeze the Chargers definitely looks ready to win something similar to this. This sort of soft course and distance does suit at 1100 Rosehill. And even though the margin's narrow here, LMNOP is definitely the one that can continue to go through the grades and really is finding the line. The others, You know, they're honest types, but they're not really going much further than this, I don't think. And as I said, like a good solid effort from this horse, Italian Sun, which either takes away from these runners or shows that it's an improving type as well. So just keep an eye on him. That's about it for the meeting. There's a few horses obviously there to follow, and just be wary that this time of year, you know, you're really getting races that there are quite a few races where it sounds bad, but nothing can win, and it's sort of a process of elimination, and then needing a bit of luck on top of that. So it is a tough time of year. There's really no answer to quite a few of these races. So if you are betting through the period, just be very cautious with how you sort of handle things. It is a different mentality looking through meetings and doing the form. So just be wary of that you're looking for different setups to try and get them through these wet tracks and average sort of, I was going to say average jockeys, but some of the better jockeys are away or out of business, and so it brings in a different factor, which you saw today with a few funny rides on back markers that came out and led and mixed things up. So these things are harder to anticipate, and you've got to factor that in at the end of the day, that these things are going to happen over during this period a bit more. So hopefully again there was something